The following program was produced by the Theosophical Society in America.
We'll begin the discussion this afternoon with a brief introduction to each of our panelists, for those who might be tuning in from outside our room. We have first Scott Olsen, who is professor of philosophy and comparative religion at Central Florida Community College. He is a lifelong student of the ancient wisdom and has received international acclaim for his decoding of the geometric mysteries of Plato. His recent book is The Golden Section, Nature's Greatest Secret. Jonathan Zimmer holds degrees in physics, mathematics, and education. He has had a rather eclectic career path as teacher, musician, writer, editor, engineer. He is also now editor of the comparative religious fiction magazine, The Crooked Arm Pillow. Uma Krishnamurthy is a physician who received her training in psychiatry in Bangalore, India. She is currently a visiting faculty member of the Yoga Biomedical Trust in London and the Homa College of Holistic Studies in Sweden. Uma travels internationally in her teaching ministry. She also has authored a book which will soon be published on yoga psychology. Amit Goswami is a professor emeritus of physics at the University of Oregon. He is a pioneer of the new paradigm of science called science within consciousness and is an advocate of quantum activism. He is the author of many successful books, including A Quantum Physicist's Guide to Enlightenment and Physics of the Soul. His latest text, The Quantum Doctor, integrates conventional and alternative medicine. We will begin our discussion this afternoon with asking each of the panelists to respond to the question of how nature has been a gateway to the sacred in their own life and work, keeping with the theme of our convention, which has been Nature Gateway to Sacred Treasure. So perhaps we'll begin with Jonathan.
Okay. If I understand the question, I guess is how I got interested in mathematics and science through nature. I remember I read a long time ago a book called Dragons of Eden by Carl Sagan, even though it's not direct contact with nature, but it was my first introduction to like scientific concepts in a deeper way about evolution, and also how science seems to clash with religion, and how religion can be drawn into that. And so I guess that's...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Scott?
Scott, if you could share a mic, that input here isn't good, so if you would share that mic.
Okay, I'd be happy to. As far as my access into nature, probably at the University of Minnesota, I took a course in geometry and art, and that was kind of my first excursion. And I've mentioned before that when I was born, I had a perinatal experience, which kind of stayed with me. And I think what's important, and maybe I could just say a word or two real quickly here, the cat is now out of the not only the bag, it's out of the box. And it's alive. What's in the box, it is. And what's in the box, and this is my background now, is the reductionist, literalist paradigm and the individual who promulgates it, and it's dead. And my access to nature really has come through Fibonacci numbers. You know, Albert Einstein, a lot of people don't realize this. Yes, he had the secret doctrine on his desk, but he also, in his youth, discovered the Fibonacci numbers, and that's what happened to me as well. Einstein realized that he should be able to figure out the laws of nature as a result. And I've had kind of a similar feeling all along. I'll move on.
Uma?
When I was growing up, a young child, I remember I used to feel very connected to nature. And sometimes I used to get very anxious when my exams came. So I would climb my favorite guava tree and talk to this tree, somehow heal me. And within 5 minutes, miraculously, I would just feel so healed and so ready to face the exams. As a child of 6 years, I realized that nature has immense healing properties. The same thing I observed with cows. You know, whenever I felt a little bit not so comfortable, I would sit with cows and gaze at them. And within 5 minutes, I would feel so cheerful. So to me, the connection to nature is, I think, a very personal connection. I feel, in a way, we are all connected. And this is what the Mandukya Upanishad says. Our physical body is connected to the whole cosmic earth, Mother Earth. Our mental body connected to the whole cosmic mind, and our consciousness connected to whole Brahman. This is what Om symbolizes. And I feel much of our distress comes because we are contracting ourselves away from nature. And one thing that saddens me today, with all this technological knowledge and advances we are making, I feel we are becoming also very artificial and synthetic and losing this very valuable connection with nature. In fact, when Arjuna was in great mental anguish, what did Krishna do? He showed his whole Virat Swarupa. He showed him how expansive is this universe. So the more contracted we are and sticking only to our own ego and memories and so on, we are bound to suffer. I feel the message of nature is to let go, allow the personal to merge into the universal. For that, we have to expand our perception and consciousness to include the nature. We are not at all cut off from nature. I will just take one more minute, and then it's a very important question to me, because to me this is my main work, in healing, and how to, I feel if people can somehow connect to nature, the sacred aspect of nature, talk to nature, nature will respond with healing. Once I was walking in Rishikesh all by myself. I was just 22 years old. I wanted to visit the great yogis and masters. That was my quest. In the middle of the night, I was walking, searching for the ashram to stay, Shivananda ashram. Suddenly it rained, thunder, lights went off. I don't know where I'm going. I was alone. There was absolutely no one there. I could just hear the Mother Ganges, and that's all. And suddenly a group of bandits came to attack me. I could sense their intention is not good. I was a young girl. I couldn't fight. I prayed to Mother Ganges, if what people say about you is real, you protect me today. And lo and behold, I saw a look of terror on the faces of these three men, and they just fled. On that day, I understood prayers. The great ancient rishis, sages, what they have talked about nature is not false, but we have to make that connection for ourselves.
Thank you. Keep that. Amit.
Well, I too had an enchanted childhood with nature. It certainly has contributed deeply, although, as a physicist, I have been much more interested in things like the sky rather than trees, although more recently I do enjoy trees.
Now we will move to some of the other questions that you all have submitted from your discussion groups. What you were asked to do was to generate questions as you inquired into the presentations together, and then to choose each one of your groups, choose 5, which were burning questions for you. Well, I have 20 questions, all of which, some of which are quite related, and some of which are quite different and all of them interesting. So we will begin with this one. Is there a law, or are there laws bridging the microcosm and the macrocosm? If so, what research in quantum physics or mathematics, and I would say, what research in each of your fields can help us to understand these laws or laws?
Yes. The law that it seems to be at the root of literally the creation of the universe is the golden section, and it's reciprocal. The ancients knew it, and it's in the ancient wisdom, but it was considered very esoteric and was not to be revealed. As I mentioned before, quoting Madame Blavatsky, Plato, for example, had taken the Sodalian Oath. And yet in his dialogues, he does reveal it if one knows how to look and how to read the dialogues. And one has to understand that there is a process known as abduction or retroduction, where when presented with a puzzle, one can come up with a hypothesis. We know from the history of ideas that Plato revealed the unity or the one, but according to Aristotle, there were 2 principles. The second principle was the indefinite dyad. Without the indefinite dyad, the one is somewhat static. What we've now figured out, and Plato knew it, reveals it in his divided line. It's also revealed in the Republic, but it's also revealed in the Timaeus by the conspicuous absence of how to construct a dodecahedron. He gives you the root 2 and the root 3 triangles, as we saw the other day, to do the other Platonic solids, but to do the dodecahedron, you have to know how to do the golden ratio, the golden cut. What's very important now is, number 1, in physics, the person who's really responsible for the recent rediscovery, is Muhammad El-Nashi, who wrote a paper in 1994, which its title is quantum space a random Cantor set with the golden section dimension at its center? This year, on January 7th, it was reported from both England and Germany, 3 laboratories in England, 1 in Germany, a collaboration that they discovered at the very center of quantum mechanics a ratio, and the ratio is the golden mean. So now it has been empirically shown, confirming not only El-Nashi, but this, what I consider the ancient wisdom, which is embedded in the various structures of the world. The Great Pyramid does it, and so forth. So I'll end there. Thank you.
All right.
There does appear to be uniformitarianism in the universe, maybe most dramatically demonstrated by Newton. For example, the legend is that he was sitting under a tree, perhaps an apple tree, and the apple fell down, and supposedly he was looking at the moon at the same time, or thinking about the moon, and thought, the same force of gravity that causes the apple to fall down here in my local space is the same force that controls the moon's orbit around the Earth, and that extends throughout the entire universe. Maybe another example might be light coming from a distant star or galaxy trillions and trillions of miles away. The same little packets of energy, photons, are the same things that are in the tiny atom that's related to the energy levels of the electron from one shell to another, something like that. So there is a lot of, from science, we can take a lot of evidence of the fact that there are laws that transcend all scales. and everywhere in the entire universe, which does seem to give a powerful message of oneness and unity.
Amit?
I pass. A difficult question.
I think the question is the microcosm and the macrocosm, the connectedness.
Yes.
From the yoga psychological point of view, I will bring in two great masters. I would like to give a little explanation again on Om, which is the symbol of this connection between the microcosm and macrocosm. The best book to read this is the Mandukya Upanishad. Om has 4 components, A, U, Ma, and A Matra. These are the 4 components of the most powerful Vedic mantra called Om. And A represents the waking state of consciousness, in which the ego in the waking state is very much connected to the cosmic physical body called Virat. U represents the dreaming state, where the ego of the dreamer is very much connected to the whole subtle cosmic mind called Hiranyagarbha. Ma represents the deep sleep state, where the ego which is in the seed form called Prajna is very much connected to the cosmic consciousness of Ishvara. And Amatra, the 4th dimension, is the immeasurable Atman, or the eternal sorrowless consciousness, which is connected to Brahman. So actually, when we chant Om and meditate, the masters say when you chant A, realize your connection with the whole Virat, physical cosmic body. When you chant U, connect with the cosmic mind. When you chant Ma, feel oneness with Ishvara. And when you be silent after chanting Om, try to feel your connection with the divine Brahman. So Om is the journey in consciousness. The second thing I would like to say, and this is to me the universal vision, is this: to merge the individual into the universal. That's how we expand. The second thing I would like to say is Ramana Maharishi, who said how to remove sorrow and suffering in others. And the best way is to set up a deep inquiry within oneself, try to find out the source of ego, and then we will realize that when the ego is dissolved, mind is quiet, we are that eternal consciousness. As soon as that realization dawns in us, it mysteriously affects the whole. And I think this Jiddu Krishnamurthy confirmed it when he said the individual transformation leads to the collective transformation.
I have a thank you. How are quantum mechanics and consciousness related?
Okay, I've got the mic, so I'll start. The question about consciousness is probably one of the biggest issues that we have before us right now. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff have made a wonderful inroad into the question of consciousness. They maintain that the quantum mechanics of the microtubules and what are called clathrons at the tips of the microtubules in the brain, they're basically quantum computers. But here's the key. Again, it all has to do, I'm telling you, with the golden ratio, which bonds the above and the below. It is the hermetic key for the whole thing. The microtubules are made up of 13 tubulin, 8 spiraling one way, 5 spiraling the other way. 13 is to 8, 8 is to 5. Those are approximations, Fibonacci approximations to the golden mean. When you double a microtubule, You might think, well, certainly then you're going to have 26 tubulin. No, it's 13 plus 8 is 21. Penrose raises the question, why are Fibonacci numbers in the microtubules? I'll tell you why. It's all resonance. As Madame Blavatsky said, all is vibration. It's all an issue of resonance, attunement, entrainment, synchrony. And as we go into higher and higher states of consciousness, whether it's initiation or simply expanding our consciousness, we go into resonance, like two guitars. One in the corner there, I'm strumming a guitar, I play particular notes, and that guitar in the corner is going to go into resonance or entrainment with it. Siddhartha Gautama sits under the bo tree. He goes into resonance, into samadhi with the entire universe, ultimately. That is our goal, by the way, ultimately. So consciousness is rooted in this same principle that we see outwardly throughout nature. It also rules our inward awareness. Thank you.
Speaking of Buddha and the bo tree, I'm thinking maybe that relates to consciousness in a quantum theory way. And that quantum theory tells us at least a couple of things, that things change very abruptly, a very discrete jump, and also that there's a lack of determinacy, that it's hard to predict things, not a determined, controlled universe forced by laws, so that we might say Buddha sitting under the bo tree, that we couldn't predict whether he would receive enlightenment or not, that that's a mystery, an undetermined event, and that perhaps when he had that moment of enlightenment, that it was a sudden leap, and that maybe that could be useful to us, borrowing from quantum theory in that sense, that things are not set in stone, and there can be radical transformations and transitions.
The most wonderful message that quantum physics gives us is when you consider the quantum measurement paradox, how an observer looks at quantum possibilities and possibilities become actual events of experience. This cannot be understood from any materialist model, because material interactions can never, and this is true of any model, including Penrose, Hameroff, or whatever model you have, material interactions can never change possibility into actuality. So it has to be something that is non-material. But if it is non-material and dual, then you get the paradox of dualism. So only way of resolving this measurement paradox, observer effect, is to posit that consciousness is the ground of all being. As you know, that's also Madame Blavatsky's first postulate, and also the basis of all spiritual traditions. So in this way, quantum physics is finally allowing us to make a solid connection between science and spirituality.
I just need to make a quick comment on that because the double slit experiment, the wave-particle duality, has been solved. And it was solved by El-Nashi some time back, and he solved it with the golden mean. The golden mean ties together the consciousness, the intelligible, the immaterial with the material. We must not forsake what Plato called the sensible world of experience. Yes, consciousness is absolutely right at the root source, but the relative reality of this world is tied together, as above, so below, and as below, so above. The key is how you tie them together, and that's where the golden mean comes in, and it's there, and you've got a handout on your seats, and I'll just refer to it. Quantum world reveals golden ratio symmetry. That symmetry interlaces scale independently. This is the key now. The big problem has been quantum mechanics has the micro world covered, relativity theory, the macro world. How can the two ever come together? Well, what has now been discovered is that the golden mean interlaces scale independently, even at the macro level. And what's happened is the whole universe has fractalized through the primordial scission that the ancient Egyptians knew about and embodied in their Great Pyramid, from top to bottom, all the way through the galaxies, the Earth, human beings, down all the way to the quarks themselves, which turn out to be functions of the golden ratio. All is tied together. Thank you.
I don't know much about quantum mechanics, but I can't resist introducing a note of humor at this stage. A student, after listening to a lecture on brain, mind, and consciousness, goes to the professor and says, "Sir, please tell me what is the nature of matter." The professor says, "Never mind." Then he asks the professor, "What is mind?" And the professor says, "Doesn't matter." I just took this opportunity since I don't know much about it. But one thing I would like to say is a student goes to the Upanishadic teacher and says, "Sir, please teach me what is reality." So he says, "Meditate and find out for yourself." He says, reality is that from which creation arises. Reality is that which is supporting the creation, and reality is that into which creation dissolves. That is called consciousness. So the student meditates. His father is his teacher, and he says, actually, then he further says, it is the body which is ultimate reality, because it is from the body that we are able to live, and so on. I won't go into details, there is no time. Then father says, continue. Then he says, prana is the reality. Without prana, we can't exist. Father says, continue. Then he says, mind is the reality, because without mind also we cannot exist or function. He says, continue your inquiry. He says, intelligence is the ultimate reality which is guiding our survival mechanisms. He says, continue. Finally, he says, ananda or bliss is the reality. It is from bliss we arise. It is bliss which sustains our actions and interactions, and it is into bliss that we dissolve. So bliss is the reality of consciousness. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Awareness, intelligence, blissfulness. The more alert we are closer to God. The more intelligent we are, not hurting others, we are closer to God. The more happy we are closer to God.
That's all right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, here's another question you've asked. In meditation, what should I look at or listen for to move to a higher state of consciousness?
One of the things that I've noticed that's very helpful to me is once you observe nature very carefully, take a pine cone, flip it upside down, look at the spirals going in opposite directions. They're in Fibonacci relation. Sometimes they're Lucas numbers, which we can't get into here, but in my book, you'll see that they are even more important. A sunflower. Look at the head of a sunflower. It'll take you into the center, and again, 89 is to 55, or 55 is to 34. They are in Fibonacci, therefore golden relationship. If you carry into your consciousness in the brow center, turning the eyes inwards and upwards, you will locate a place where you will begin to go into synesthesia. You will begin to see sound. The senses cross over. All is vibration. And these geometric objects, literally, that we find in nature will assist you. A spiral, take a look at for example, a nautilus shell. And if you can take that into your consciousness and focus the eyes again, inwards and upwards, you can find the point where if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be filled with light.
I think it's an infinite ocean, kind of, and the most brilliant mathematicians and scientists that have ever lived are humbled by the vastness of it and cannot probe the depths of it. On the other hand, anyone, a small child, can wander along the shore and dip their foot into the same water. And I mean, you can look at a beautiful sunset, and you do not have to understand the mathematical formula of a sphere, even though the sun is shaped like that, or the light that's streaming towards you. You don't have to understand the physics of the light or the anatomy and physiology of the eye and the nervous system and the brain to appreciate it. And I think maybe we kind of get all that for free anyway, even if we don't understand it directly, because we're all a part of it.
I think Amit wants me to talk more, perhaps. Well, the question is very interesting question because it concerns the practice of meditation. And Patanjali I would like to bring in here. Patanjali has suggested 6 types of meditation to help us improve a one-pointedness. He says you can meditate on any sorrowless object. When we meditate or choose a symbol for meditation, it should have 2 properties. It should be sorrowless, and it should have the ability to elevate our consciousness. So be careful in the selection of the symbol. I remember one master said his student took a symbol of buffalo for meditation, and in 20 years' time, he was roaring like a buffalo. So the masters say, whatever you think about, you will become that. So be careful. And Patanjali says, select an sorrowless object or select a sorrowless being, an enlightened master you can meditate on. For me, I meditate on Ramana Maharishi a lot. They can help you. They can guide you in the meditation, or you can meditate on the 4 states of consciousness symbolized by Om, or you can meditate on certain qualities like friendliness or compassion or other higher emotions, cheerfulness. Whatever your limitation is, don't meditate on that. Meditate on the opposite of your limitation. These are some guidelines. There's a lot more. I won't go into very much depth. But the great master said, either meditate on enlightened master, a sorrowless being, and the most important meditation, which I do on myself, meditate on your innermost sorrowless light. There is a light in each one of us, the divine light, which is untouched by sorrow, and therefore it is sacred. Anything untouched by sorrow is sacred. Meditate on that. And finally, he says, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Dharana, one-pointed meditation on your object you have chosen. It requires effort, and we all falter in that many times. But pursue it. The second is dhyana, a relaxed way of holding the object of your meditation. Third is samadhi, let it go. So these are some suggestions given by Patanjali.
This is actually the first question that was given to us. And it relates to the idea that when one begins to bring out truths that have been hidden, there's a certain danger in that revealing. How have you escaped the death sentence after revealing the secret? In other words, I think, how have you renewed yourself continuously when working at the edge of your own field, the edges of our understanding in your areas of work?
In my own case, I'll cite an example. I live in a very, very conservative area. And I've taught there now for, 25, 26 years. By the way, My college is alchemically transmuted from a 2-year school. It's now College of Central Florida. They would be upset if I don't mention that to you now. It's a 4-year school. We built I'll give you one example. We built a sacred stone circle modeled after Inverness in Great Britain. And we brought Keith Critchlow, the geometer, sacred geometer par excellence, a student of Bucky Fuller, and so forth over, and we designed it, laid it out. We got Walmart to donate these huge stones. And they hauled them over. We did it for free. It's the most beautiful thing you can imagine. And you go into resonance in these things. They're designed in that way. But there are certain elements that don't understand it, and as a result, without my knowledge, the more conservative elements of the community destroyed it. They got the local commission to justify going out there and removing all the stones. And it's almost sinful to even think about it happening. I've had also personal attacks. Douglas Baker, when he progressed the chart of the United States forward to 2000, back in the 90s, I was the one student whose name came up. Scott Olsen, teaching comparative religion at Central Florida, will come under attack. That does happen, and it did happen to me, but you have to be tough. You tough it out. Now, because I've pursued it, nobody can touch me. And that's how I feel very strongly. Amit Goswami mentioned the other day that they stopped giving him raises at his institution. Typically, people won't get tenured if they're not tenured yet. They won't publish their papers. So you must be aware of that. But on the other hand, truth, beauty, and goodness must prevail. And so those of us in this game, we must persist. Thank you.
Yeah, it's tough. I think people that know the truth or just have a radical theory, it can be difficult. There is a legend that there was an ancient Greek fellow who knew that the square root of 2 was irrational. And it may be just a legend, but supposedly he was pushed off a cliff and drowned in the sea because he wanted to reveal it. Then, on the other hand, Galileo, he recanted that the Earth goes around the sun at the Inquisition. I think his friends and students and supporters wondered, why did you recant? And he said, well, it doesn't matter what I say. The Earth still goes around the sun no matter what. And so that was a practical solution. I guess he preferred to live a comfortable life than persist.
Lao Tzu, the Chinese master of Tao, had an advice for all of us, which is that if you look at the forest during a storm, the big trees all are in the danger of falling, but the bamboo tree or little trees, they don't have to fear. So one trick that I learned early on is to lie low. And then only minor stuff will happen to you, but nothing major.
To your work.
Well, I asked for clarification again of the question, and Maria was kind enough to say, how do you renew yourself and keep the enthusiasm going if you meet with resistance? Very interesting question, because I think it concerns our own personal practices. Basically, how I renew myself, because I suffer a lot from jet lags and food problems. And resistances, so far by God's grace, I haven't met with much. I do remember, however, one conference in Sweden where I was invited, a very traditional psychiatry conference in Sweden, where I was invited to present a talk on yoga psychology. And there were at least 100 psychiatrists in the audience, very distinguished people. And my organizer who invited me, he told me, Uma, you please don't talk about mystics, masters, and don't talk of non-duality of Om and all that. And don't do any chanting. You just present scientific work on yoga and that's it. I said, all right. But somehow I stood on the dais. My problem is I can never prepare, and that's why I always say, don't record my talks, please. I don't know what will come. And I remember standing on the dais. I remembered what he said, but actually the first thing that came to my mouth was chanting. And I made all the audience chant Om with me 3 times. I remember they were in full suit and tie and very much feeling funny, but they chanted it. And I spoke only about Om and the mystics and the masters. I spoke continuously. It was a 2-hour presentation, and I spoke. Then I was very worried what's going to happen to me. And there was a pin drop silence after the talk. There was absolutely no clapping. I thought, now I have to go home, next plane. And the funny thing, I saw all of them stand up and give me a standing ovation for 1 minute. And they said, you had guts. We all believe in what you say, but we are scared to speak it out. So this was one possible resistance I faced. I feel my enthusiasm comes from being truthful to my own convictions, to my own faith, adhering to that, and not getting worried too much about what others will think of me or what opinion they will formulate of me. I feel the truth is I think one thing I like in Theosophy, there is no religion higher than truth. Whatever truth you believe in, present that. And if it has the power behind it, it will overcome all resistances. If there is no power behind it, the resistances will come, and then you have to face it. But never swerve from what we believe and we have experienced as truth is what gives me the energy, enthusiasm. And many times I think this is my last year of traveling, I should stop. Even this time I was saying that this is enough for me. I told my teacher, it is enough. My body is very delicate, I can't handle. And he says, yes, but as soon as I see all of you so interested, so sympathetic, so loving, so helpful, my heart melts and I'm back again in the West. So I think whatever the differences, I feel we are all the same in consciousness, and that helps me to overcome the resistances.
Thank you. This is a rather technical question. Quantum mechanics state that scale matters in Bell's theory. Does the 100th monkey phenomena begin to disprove this theory?
There is really no 100 monkey phenomenon. However, there was no experiment. The experiment was misinterpreted, misconstrued by a very enthusiastic author. I won't name any names. However, Rupert Sheldrake does have a theory which suggests something like the 100 monkey. It suggests that there may be a threshold of transformation, which then can become universal, and the mechanisms for it, I personally think that this is true, and the mechanism for it actually is reincarnation. But too much details. I don't think there is any contradiction in these things between quantum theory and this kind of theory. Quantum theory has no comments to make, as far as I can tell, about 100 monkey phenomenon. It would be very nice. In Buddhism, there is a story, famous story, that 5 people, not even people, 1 person and a bird, a monkey, or whatever, 5 creatures started to meditate, and the village became peaceful. I always liked that story. And indeed, I personally believe that if few of us transform, the whole world eventually, after maybe 10, 15 generations, will get the benefit of it. Not immediately, perhaps. So, again, I don't see any incompatibility between quantum physics and this idea.
I'd remind us all of what David Bohm said about the essence of quantum interconnectedness, that the whole universe is enfolded into each and every being, and each being is enfolded back into the universe. There have been some very, very interesting studies done, one by the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi Institute, the Transcendental Meditation people, where they'd go into various high crime rate cities and they would meditate in a group, and they found statistically that it would lower the crime rate. Now, unfortunately, that didn't necessarily last, but it definitely appeared that there was a kind of effect, morphic field or resonance created, which was generated. Again, this whole notion of the everything is vibratory. Everything is like little strings resonating. If an individual, like a guru, becomes extremely powerful, and I remind you to look to their eyes, because as Plato said, the eyes not only take in light, but they exude, they transmit. And if you have a powerful, what I would call philosopher's stone, who's the seed, and a group especially can do this, and this is part of what, to me, Theosophy is all about, is as we change our consciousness, we change the consciousness of the world. And it spreads out, the morphic resonance. Thank you.
I'm thinking of how Isaac Newton and Leibniz seem to simultaneously come up with the calculus, as a famous example. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between some kind of non-locality thing or synchronicity, but it's extremely tempting to think that there's something in the mystery of the universe that does have something like the morphogenic field that seems to have these phenomena.
Well, I think I'm very lucky to have a mic all to myself. That's the privilege of being a woman, I guess. Any case, when I don't understand something very well, I will give a joke. A student goes to the Zen master and says, "Master, what should I meditate on?" And the master says, "Meditate on anything except a monkey." And the student sits for meditation. Only the thought of the monkey is dominating. This is a joke only on a monkey. But I think I think all my distinguished panelists have already commented on morphogenetic field. I don't have much to, but one thing I would like to say, one should be convinced, all the great masters, and to me, Ramana Maharshi's teachings spoke to me. A student goes to Ramana and says, "Master, I am depressed because I have labeled myself as a sinner. Please help me." And the master said, "The worst sin you can do is to label yourself as a sinner. Stop it immediately and meditate on the fact you are divine." I think the best help we can do to society is to keep our mind very positive, uplifted, and when we talk to people, try to focus on the positive in them, give them an opportunity to bring out the best in them rather than the worst. Each one of us has power. We have to use it carefully and help others also to be lifted to a state of positivity. I think in this Kali Yuga today, where dense negative energies are predominating, each one of us has a valuable role to play. And this type of collective energy, I cannot tell you, personally I experienced it this time. So many obstacles came that I should not be here. And the last obstacle was overcome on the 14th of this month, and I could be here. I understood this group is not an ordinary group. It has power behind it. It has the divine grace behind it. It has intention behind it. And that's how we are all sitting here. We should not underestimate such meetings, God-given opportunity. We should go back home after this and be empowered and empower others. This is the best help we can give to humanity at this stage.
There is a related question here. Perhaps we can, if you wish, go into it a little more deeply. The question is, how can we better see people or things as they truly are? That is, what can we do to open ourselves up to a person or thing's goodness? This is an extension of what Uma has already offered, but I think it's especially relevant because there's so much in our world today that we might label unhelpful. Let's just put it that way.
Well, since I have the mic, I think so many people suffer from what might be called the spell of unenlightenment. I think the task might be just to glimpse the behind the veil, kind of.
When we see negativity in others, we're really projecting faults that we probably have in ourselves. And if we find that center of being, the love that was mentioned earlier in the lecture this morning, and come from the heart and find divinity within us, we will see the divinity in others as well.
I think this is a very crucial question, how to see goodness in every person. I think this is a challenge to each one of us. We should remember there are all categories of people here, and this is why I think the study of evolution is meaningful. And everybody doesn't have the same opportunities. We should have a little compassion in ourselves and not expect anything from anyone. What I do is, when I talk to people, I don't expect anything from that person. I don't want anything. I don't expect anything. And I really don't want to even judge them. Because in my healing work, I have discovered it's only when you are non-judgmental, the person before you gets healed. I remember a man who came to me after 32 visits to psychiatrists. He said, if you can't help me today, I will commit suicide. I was so anxious. I was so worried. I sat with him 4 hours and listened to his story. And after that, I gave counseling. He left. I thought, I prayed to God, let him be alive. Next day he came, he said, I am totally healed. I said, I was so thrilled. I thought my counseling helped him. And I said, what is in my counseling that helped? He said, nothing you said helped me. Then I said, how did you get the benefit? He said, after I told you my whole story, the burden I'm carrying for 30 years, you just sat back calmly and you said, is that all? As soon as you said that, everything lifted from me. I feel so light. I must confess I did it unconsciously, but I learned for myself. This is the secret of healing, and this is how we can learn to see goodness in every person. I feel always we have the faith God is sitting in them. Sometimes it is manifest, easy to connect. Sometimes unmanifest, more difficult to connect. But this we should take as a challenge and go on talking to that person until we find something positive, catch that, and go on exploring into that.
So that's a wonderful way to end our discussion, and I think a good summary.